Okay, we are glad you are here. If this is your first time here or your 101st time, we're glad you're here. If you carry the weight of a weary world on your shoulders, or you entered through the doors with a song in your heart and a skip in your step, we're glad you're here. If you are the loudest voice in the town square, or the subtle hand behind the scenes, we're glad you're here. If you have failed once or 1,000 times, we are glad you're here. If you sing like angels or mumble behind the hymnal, we're glad you're here. This community is what it is because of your presence. So welcome. Welcome into this space of love, support, justice, compassion, fellowship, and worship. We are glad you're here. So today we're having a program by Bobby Schaefer, someone near and dear to my heart, about the principle. And we're going to start with joys and concerns. And I have a couple. Today is the 70th birthday of my middle brother, Peter Schaefer. Happy birthday. There's a joy. And I'm sad to announce that yesterday was the last day on earth for Lee Wright, who succumbed to his illness yesterday. He was a beloved member of the community and a singer and just an all-around asset. Saw him 5 weeks for the last time. That's very sad.
So is that the Lee Wright associated with KTWU?
That is correct. Yes.
What was the illness, do you know?
I think it was pancreatic cancer.
Pancreatic cancer. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's sad, it's too bad. How old was Lee, you know?
No, I don't. I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sad about it. Closed captioning is on, by the way, and if you enable it on your computer or phone, then you will see it. Anyone else have any joys or concerns?
I do. Tess is home from college. She tested positive for COVID.
Oh,
And so she'll be quarantining at home for at least 10 days. She feels okay. She's lost her taste and smell and a little tired. But she's young, she's healthy, and it'll be fine. And then on a joy, Etta played in her very first rugby game yesterday and the team won.
Who'd they play?
well, beans. Yeah, I might also add in the sickness category, Patty brought home something from daycare, which got Bobby and I. I was sick last week. It looks like Bobby's going to be sick this week. And I'm about 50% recovered from this thing. So, not COVID, but it's still pretty yucky. Anyone else?
David, this is Bob McDaniel. Some of you may remember a close friend of ours, Mashira Darby Bay, who is 30 now, but we met her 25 years ago, and she's been a part of our lives ever since then. But she and her husband were married yesterday in Las Vegas.
This the same man that she's been with for years, or this?
Nope, a new one, David. I mean a new one, Frank,
Where is she living now?
in Topeka.
Did she ever finish college?
Nope.
Well, it wasn't due to any fault on your part, you and Richie's part, because I know you worked very hard to get her scholarships and all that, right?
Well, Frank, none of us can see what's going to happen, and it's been interesting with everybody we've been involved with.
Well, I know you all put in special effort with her, and so it wasn't due to any lack of attention on your part.
Yeah. I don't regret any of it. We still see her.
Any other joys and concerns?
I do have one. I don't know whether I should share it publicly or not, but I had an encounter with Debbie Scanlon the other day, and she seemed to be confused. I sent a note to Susie Boy about referring her to the caring committee or whatever it's called. Someone might want to check in on Debbie and see how she's doing.
Debbie took Don to the K-State game yesterday, and when he came back, he didn't mention. I will ask him about that. But whenever she has an extra ticket to the K-State game, this is tickets that Bill bought years ago, and they've continued. Anyway, Don gets invited to fill in the foursome if nobody else is available. I'll ask him.
Well, don't make a big deal of it. If he thinks she's okay, then that's good enough to me. Maybe I was the one who's confused.
I'll let you know what he says, Frank.
Okay. So
We will go ahead and start the program.
We're going to light the chalice first. This is unto the Church Universal, unto the Church Universal, which is the depository of all ancient wisdom and the school of all modern thought, which recognizes in all prophets a harmony, in all scriptures a unity, and through all dispensations a continuity, which abjures all that separates and divides, and always magnifies all that unifies and brings peace, which seeks truth and freedom, justice and love, and individual discipline in social duty, and which shall make of all sects, classes, nations, and races one global community. Unto this church and unto all its members, known and unknown throughout the world, we pledge the allegiance of our hands and hearts. And so we light the chalice. David?
We shall not bow down to racism. We shall not bow down to injustice. We shall not bow down to exploitation. Oh, what's he gonna do? I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand. Just can't tolerate no racism. No, I just can't tolerate injustice. No, I just can't tolerate no exploitation. What's he gonna do? I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand. What's he gonna do? I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand. I'm gonna stand. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, And the program today is about the 8th principle. The third Sunday of every month will be about a principle until we run out of them. So that's about 8 months away. December 1st, 2019, the congregation voted to amend the bylaws to include an 8th principle. That is, we, the members of the Unitarian Universal Fellowship of Topeka, covenant to affirm and promote the building of a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. This amendment was not without controversy, and some felt that not enough information and/or discussion had been forthcoming prior to the proposal and vote on the amendment. When I checked the UUA website for the 8th principle, I found the following. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote journeying toward a spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. However, the 8th principle will not be brought before the UUA board until January of 2023, and only then will it be possible for placement on the General Assembly agenda in 2023 or 2024. When the UUA began the 8th principle project, it addressed something vital that had been missing in our UU movement, namely that anti-racism and anti-oppression must be central in congregational life and our community building. The mammoth project of fostering conversation within congregations and other communities, and then calling on those communities to make an explicit statement in the form of the 8th principle, has become a true groundswell within Unitarian Universalism. In this way, thousands of Unitarian Universalists have become part of the real fundamental work of anti-racism and anti-oppression in our own communities. And that was the plan here at UUFT. Maybe we rushed in our vote to approve the 8th principle in our fellowship without the necessary groundwork. Whatever the case, the division and dissent within our fellowship lies in part in the way this important step forward was handled. The process of examining and possibly revising Article 2 of the UUA bylaws is a scheduled effort of the UUA board. This is demanded by the bylaws themselves. The study commission, who has been charged with making a proposal to the UUA board in January 2023, has tremendous respect for what the 8th principle movement has accomplished and is accomplishing within UU communities. More than the language of the 8th principle itself, we are moved by the ongoing conversations about what it means to be accountable to each other and how we must, through our actions, take on the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression as an inextricable part of our Unitarian Universalist faith. And so, through the task we have been charged with is larger than the specifics of the 8th principle. We understand these ideals to be at the very heart of our work and very much part of the direction we are journeying. We understand the work we are doing to be building on the strengths of the 8th principle movement. It is the hope of the UUA that whatever flowers grow from the process of engaging UUs in this reimagining, the seeds sown by the 8th principle project will surely bloom brightly. So I started researching the topic, and I began to wonder just what the beloved community means, because its use is central and key in both the UUFT 8th principle and the proposed UUA 8th principle. I found out that the beloved community is a term that was first coined in the early days of the 20th century by the philosopher theologian Josiah Royce, who founded the Fellowship of Reconciliation. However, it was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., also a member of the Fellowship of Reconciliation, who popularized the term and invested it with a deeper meaning, which has captured the imagination of people of goodwill all over the world. The beloved community for him was a realistic, achievable goal that could be attained by a critical mass of people committed to and trained in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. Dr. King's beloved community is a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. In the beloved community, international disputes will be resolved by peaceful conflict resolution and reconciliation of adversaries instead of by military power. Love and trust will triumph over fear and hatred. Peace with justice will prevail over war and military conflict. Dr. King recognized that conflict was an inevitable part of human experience, but he believed that conflicts could be resolved peacefully and adversaries could be reconciled through a mutual determined commitment to nonviolence. No conflict, he believed, need erupt in violence, and all conflicts in the beloved community should end with reconciliation of the adversaries cooperating together in a spirit of friendship and goodwill. As early as 1956, Dr. King spoke of the beloved community as the end goal of nonviolent boycotts. As he said in a speech at a victory rally following the announcement of a favorable U.S. Supreme Court decision desegregating the seats on Montgomery's buses, the end is reconciliation. The end is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It is this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opponents into friends. It is this type of understanding goodwill that will transform the deep gloom and the old age into the exuberant gladness of the new age. It is this love which will bring about miracles in the hearts of men. An ardent student of the teaching of Mahatma Gandhi, Dr. King was much impressed with Mahatma's befriending of his adversaries, most of whom professed profound admiration for Gandhi's courage and intellect. Dr. King believed that the age-old tradition of hating one's opponents was not only immoral, but bad strategy, which perpetuated the cycle of revenge and retaliation. Only nonviolence, he believed, had the power to break the cycle of retributive violence and create lasting peace through reconciliation. In his 1959 sermon on Gandhi, Dr. King elaborated on the after effects of choosing nonviolence over violence. Quote, "The aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of the beloved community, so that when the battle's over, a new relationship comes into being between the oppressed and the oppressor." In the same sermon, he contrasted violent versus nonviolent resistance to oppression. The way of acquiescence leads to a moral and spiritual suicide. The way of violence leads to bitterness in the survivors and brutality in the destroyers. But the way of nonviolence leads to redemption and the creation of the beloved community. The core value of the quest for Dr. King's beloved community was agape love. He said that agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people. It begins by loving others for their sakes and makes no distinction between a friend and an enemy. It is directed toward both. Agape is love seeking to preserve and create community. In his 1963 sermon, Loving Your Enemies, published in his book, Strength to Love, Dr. King addressed the role of unconditional love in struggling for the beloved community. With every ounce of our energy, we must continue to rid this nation of the incubus of segregation, but we shall not in the process relinquish our privilege and our obligation to love. While abhorring segregation, we shall love the segregationist. This is the only way to create the beloved community. One expression of agape love in Dr. King's beloved community is justice, not for any one oppressed group, but for all people. As Dr. King often said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. He felt that justice could not be parceled out to individuals or groups, but was the birthright of every human being in the beloved community. In a July 13, 1966 article, Dr. King affirmed the ultimate goal inherent in the quest for the beloved community. I do not think of political power as an end. Neither do I think of economic power as an end. They are ingredients in the objective that we seek in life. And I think that the end of that objective is a truly brotherly society, the creation of the beloved community. In keeping with Dr. King's teachings, the King Center embraces the conviction that the beloved community can be achieved through an unshakable commitment to nonviolence. The King Center urges us to study Dr. King's 6 principles and 6 steps of nonviolence and make them a way of life in our personal relationships, as well as a method for resolving social, economic, and political conflicts, reconciling adversaries, and advancing social change in our community, nation, and world. So where did the 8th principle concept come from that incorporates this beloved community? Paula Cole Jones of the Joseph Priestley District, which now is incorporated into a larger district, was a director of social justice, and she developed the idea of the existence of 2 different paradigms in UU circles, the UU 7 principles and the beloved community, or deep multiculturalism. After working with congregations on these issues for over 15 years, she realized that a person can believe they're being a good UU and following the 7 principles without thinking about or dealing with racism and other oppressions at the systemic level. Evidence most UU congregations are primarily European American in membership, culture, especially music, and leadership, even when located near diverse communities. She realized that an 8th principle was needed to correct this, and talked with Bruce Pollock Johnson about some of the components that should be in it. Then he put together an initial draft in 2013, and that's how long this has been going on, since 2013. And the 2 of them worked with a group of anti-racist activists in the Joseph Priestley District to refine this. Bruce's congregation, the UU Church of the Restoration in Philadelphia, incorporated it into their covenant at that time. And then in May 2017, formally adopted it for themselves and recommended that the UUA adopt it. UUs and UUA have done very good work in fighting racism, such as during the Civil Rights Movement and in the 1990s, passing a resolution in 1997 at GA, which was a precursor to the resolution in 1992 to become anti-racist, anti-depressant, anti-oppression, and multicultural, or ARAOMC organization. But the funding and support started to wane in the 2000s. Our accountability mechanism failed us. UUs also have a mixed record historically in other areas of racial justice. We had people on both sides of abolition, including people like Jefferson, who was the slaveholder, and Unitarians were proponents of eugenics, leading to some of the racial extremes of Nazism and apartheid in South Africa. For people identified as white, it is too easy to ignore these issues, which is exactly what keeps the system of racism in our society alive, and in fact worsens right now. We need to decenter whiteness and other dominant cultures in UUism. The 8th principle came from feeling that we need something to renew our commitment to this work, to hold ourselves accountable, and to fulfill the potential of our existing principles. Why is this such an important topic now? The UUA has just gone through a crisis related to inclusive hiring practices, especially related to whites being hired over highly qualified Latinx candidates, resulting in the resignation of the UUA president. In response to this crisis, Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism and the diverse revolutionary UU ministries endorsed the 8th principle. The Black Lives UU's main point is that the UUA voted in 1997 at GA to commit to intentionally becoming an ARAOMC institution. Initially, good progress was made, but in the early 2000s, funding and support began to decline. The recent hiring crisis is not surprising in the light of the decreasing support and the lost focus. The Black Lives UU is holding all of the UUA accountable to that commitment and expresses disappointment that the 8th principle has not already been supported and midwifed by UUA leadership. Allies for Racial Equality, the UUA White Ally Group, support Black Lives UU and Black Lives UU endorsement of the 8th principle. UU funding and focus in the last decade shifted towards shallow diversity rather than deep multicultural beloved community and structural change. UU support for the movement of Black lives has been encouraged. The best way for us to truly support racial justice in a significant way is to purge ourselves and our institutions of the culture and exclusive practices of whiteness and white supremacy. The new Jim Crow, mass incarceration, and the criminal justice system replacing the older systems of slavery and Jim Crow laws, police violence against people of color, recent Supreme Court decisions on voting rights and affirmative action, the election of Donald Trump with advisors and followers, including Attorney General Jeff Sessions, openly supporting white supremacists, show that the country is moving quickly and dangerously in the wrong direction. UUs need to take strong leadership to reverse these trends. And why the UUA in the US? Whiteness and chattel slavery, cultural racism, were invented in the US at the same time modern Unitarian Universalism was being created. Unitarians originally were largely from the New England European American elite, often did not treat Native American peoples well, benefited from slavery, and some were leaders in the eugenics movement promoting birth control for people of color because they were seen as inferior. Some Unitarian Universalist ministers, more Unitarians since Universalism was more of a working class movement, spoke out against slavery, but we did little as a denomination. After the Trayvon Martin verdict, many UU ministers said nothing in church. The UUs did a very good job during the civil rights movement, largely at the behest of Dr. King, and we should be proud of that. But there's a long period of silence until the late 80s and the early 90s, then progress for about a decade or so, but we have regressed, leading to the UUA president resigning over hiring inclusivity issues. Why UUFT? Currently, we were without a minister or DRE. Currently, we have not been able to provide a religious home that attracts a broad spectrum of the population, including but not limited to people of color. Currently, we are involved in a serious conflict resolution process. In my opinion, it is very necessary at this time to re-examine the 8th principle that we adopted as a bylaws change in 2019. We need to recommit to becoming a beloved community and all that entails with Dr. King's description. Because if we do not become in truth a beloved community as envisioned by Dr. King, how can we hope to covenant and affirm to promote the building of a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions? Now, I want to hear from all who have taken the time to listen to this presentation. Your thoughts on moving forward?
So, please unmute before you make your comment.
I want to say thank you. This is Ellen. I want to say thank you to Bobby for bringing this resolution or this principle to our attention. I don't have any good ideas, I guess, at this moment, but I thank you, Bobby, and keep at it, okay?
Bobby, this is Vicki. Thanks for the deep research you've done, and I'd like a copy of everything you said today. I want to think and ponder. And the tricky part, of course, is that, white liberals, we kind of want to stand on what we've done in the past. Or in our case, sometimes, by being able to say, well, we can't be racist. We adopted a Black child. Well, no, we can be. And we can certainly still support white supremacy. So it's a big, tough task. Bobby, thank you for doing the kickoff. Maybe we can work forward. Thank you.
I hope so. I certainly appreciate your having brought the concept of beloved community to scholarship when you did.
Along the lines of a transcript, I should mention that this has been recorded and will be posted as soon as possible on our YouTube channel, which is, there's a link in the, on our Facebook page to that.
Sometimes it's easier though to read something than it is to hear it. I know that I missed parts of the presentation. I think reading it can help.
I
believe
agree.
that's possible.
I certainly, in researching it, had a lot more deeper meaning than everything we've done over the last 10 years at UUFT.
We'll make that available. Other comments? Susanna, please unmute.
Sorry about that. I see a very direct link to this. I don't know if anyone else will, but I work in higher education, and right now there is a crisis in the controversy of the critical race theory being taught. I presume everyone's familiar with that. Are people familiar with that that's going on? Yeah, and I think that's a worthy thing to pay attention to and to speak up about if you have strong feelings about that.
Thank you.
This is Janine. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I also, second, third, fourth, other people have said that it was a well-researched presentation, and thank you for that, Bobby. As far as a way forward, I would like for us to have a racism task force or anti-racism task force, something like that, that is a ongoing part of UUFT. And that will provide us with ideas and activities and things that we need to do systemically. I'm glad to hear the support for the 8th principle. And again, when we had our first conflict resolution listening circles, which agreed by a pretty wide majority, I think, that the 8th principle was the one we had the most trouble with and that we needed to work on the most. My concern about setting up a task force or a team is that it is the history that we have. The Beloved Conversations program was pretty lightly attended. We could not gather a full group, for a full session, we had to offer it to people in Lawrence as well, because there were not enough people at UUFT that were willing to sign up for that. And I found that one of the most life-changing experiences I have ever had. And then I don't know, maybe Lauren can speak to this, but I don't know what kind of response her reading group on racism has had. It's one thing to say we need to do something, but I don't know what to do. It's another for people to actually take advantage of things that have been offered or we might offer again, because although I would be really excited to be on a team like that, I also would I'd be hesitant because of my concern that there would not be the participation that is necessary for something like that to really be helpful. I guess I'd like to think that maybe those two groups so far are why it's still in front of us as an issue. And people are not letting it drop, at least in identifying it. Let's not let it drop in terms of doing something. There you go.
I feel that unless we focus on truly making UUFT a beloved community and all that it means, we can't even begin to tackle the rest of the statement of by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. What we end up with is conflict and resignations and anger. And if we become truly a beloved community, we can approach these kinds of disagreements in nonviolent ways, whereas Dr. King says adversaries become friends working toward the same goals.
This is Raymond. I really want to reinforce that point that Bobby's making, that it's the end goal, it's the beloved community. That how is that community existent? These other things will come along once there is this full commitment to that idea, that belief. Yes, good point. Very good point.
Hi guys. I just wanted to say that I love that this conversation is happening in a frank manner. And I also wanted to say that I think UUFT and UUs in general have had a fraught relationship with wanting to include everyone in the community, but then not liking how it changes the community. Because I mean, when you're trying to incorporate everyone, incorporation doesn't mean assimilation. It doesn't mean that UU and UUFT is going to look the same as it does now. If we support radical acceptance, if we support beloved community and bringing more and more people in and expanding the congregation, then that means that there are going to be changes. And change is hard.
And not changes to make it happen, but changes after the fact.
Right. Change is hard. And anytime you bring more people in, you're going to have, new interpretations of the principles. You're going to have new needs, and we're not going to be able to predict what those needs are going to be. So it's going to take a truly open heart and a truly open mind and a truly open congregation to make that happen. And patience, and there's going to be anger and confusion. And I honestly hope that we can look at this and say, you know what, we're gonna practice radical acceptance. We're going to practice being open to whatever that means the community is going to look like in the end. Because I know that there's a lot of anger right now. It's Grammy, yeah. There's a lot of anger right now in the larger community and a lot of hurt. Working in a mental health facility, I see it on a daily basis, the effects of racism and privilege and all these icky subjects that feel icky. And I honestly think that we as a congregation can make it happen. It's just going to be really uncomfortable. But I think we can do it.
Thank you, Sky and Jake and Adeline.
This is Vicky again. Bravo, Skylar and Addie. Bravo, bravo. Yes. And that's the concept also. You're talking about uncomfort with change. That's what's also behind the idea of radical hospitality. If you really want to practice radical hospitality, you have to accept the fact that you will be as changed as the people that are coming in, that you hope will be changed too. It's a two-way street, and we often don't want to be uncomfortable. We want things the way they always were. And I'll tell you what, having Devin and Devontae, two Black men living with us for the past 2 months, up close, we have had the opportunity to see even more than when David was with us, as our son, white privilege and what it does to people that are not white, and poverty, and the kind of jobs they have to work, where they have to work nights, sometimes 7 days a week, to make ends meet. And anybody that can help them, help us, help them, would be greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Vicki. And thanks to you guys for doing that.
I just wanted to say that the program committee has decided to have programs on race and on these issues once a month. And we hope we're planning to move forward with that in October. So I hope that will help a little bit.
Doesn't help to ignore it, it helps to talk about it.
I also want to thank Skylar for her comments. I think we probably need to enshrine those somewhere.
Anyone else?
Bravo, David and Bobby. You did a good job. Bravo.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that Skylar hit the nail on the head, metaphorically speaking, with the portion that she was talking about with change. And I'm just going to drop a link in the chat here. There's a number of things at the VA. Many of us have gone through change management training, and one of the things that I was thinking of when she brought that up is just that many of us are at different stages, like with this ADKAR model that they teach us about: awareness, desire, knowledge, action, reinforcement. And I think until we all are, because what I heard Janine talking about is that there's different levels of participation with even just awareness and desire. And until we can get to the point where we're all ready to take action, if we're still in the awareness, desire, knowledge stages, it's really hard to move on to action and even the reinforcement stage. So I thought that that was a really good point, and I just wanted to share that because at least what we talk about at work is that really you can't skip over these stages. You can't just go straight to here's the job aid, here's the whatever. You have to really work through this process. And with something as deep as important as dismantling racism, we really can't skip over those important early steps.
I want to add something to that, Patricia. And that is, yes, everyone is at a different stage in those stages that you mentioned. And certainly understanding and embracing the concept of beloved community is an important first step. My concern is, because we are all at different stages, I don't think, and I don't know that anyone has said this, but I fear that it's implied, we have to wait until the entire community is on the same footing in terms of perhaps beloved community understanding, and that's what we're going to focus on first for everybody. That I do not agree with. Because we are at different stages, I think we need people working on, for example, an anti-racism team in order to keep pushing the people that may not be at the same understanding of those or on the same steps that you outlined there, Patricia. Otherwise, my concern is when I heard well, we need to do this before we address anti-racism. Again, being in the beloved conversations, I hear things so much differently than I did before. And I heard that as perhaps a person of color would hear that, which is oh yeah, here we go again. There's another thing we have to do first. And it puts work on racism back down a step. I think we can do both. I think we can understand or work on understanding our understanding of beloved community and anti-racism at the same time, because everyone will be a little bit different place on each of those.
I agree with you, Janine, and I think the people who are more at that forefront need to be leading the anti-racism component with the community that's the part of the community that reached that point needs to work on it. And as more people become enlightened, they can join you in that process. But it has to be enabling people, not pushing people.
I think some people need pushing. Sorry, but no, I know what you mean. So that it's not conflict; it's working together. And I actually think the team needs to have both on it, so that it is clear. It is clearer what is helpful at people at different stages. What is helpful at those stages, and what, because I don't think a team needs to do just one thing. I think there's a number of things we could be doing, and it would address all those levels.
I think the board would welcome someone willing to lead such teams stepping forward.
That may come out of our team that's working on the Sunday programs, I would hope. And I'm certainly ready to start a list if people want to let me know.
That would be an important thing to share.
Anyone else?
This is Erica. I'm fairly new. I've been to a few services, but I just wanted to echo Janine. I think it's really important that at this point, because so much time has already passed, and we haven't gotten to the point where we need to get already, that discomfort is just going to happen. People are going to be uncomfortable. People are going to be at different levels, but we need to call in and raise up those people and get them to where everyone needs to be. But at the same time, we do still need to do the work. We do still need to have some form of action. And I work in an independent living center, and I just see systemic stuff every single day. And just, there's so many different actions that we can take as white people just to raise up others. We just donating money, donating supplies, helping different organizations that are already doing the work. There is action that isn't going to be necessarily uncomfortable that we could take right now today.
Any other comments? If not, then I will go on with the closing words.
Dr. King said this: our goal is to create the beloved community. And this will require implementing not new teachings or changing your particular religion or ethnic group or anything that you are, but actually going to the depths of who you are and living it. Then you look to the great wisdom traditions of the world and affirm humanity's collective wisdom and our emerging neuroscience, which is supporting the insight that everything we think and do feeds back and creates new pathways in the brain. New York cab drivers, London cab drivers have huge spatial memories. You go out and learn a new language, they can show you on a CT scan. They hook up the great meditators from the Tibetan tradition or from the Franciscan nun tradition, and guess what? When they ask them to pull the cord while they're taking pictures of their brains when they're in deep meditation, the same area of their brain lights up no matter what tradition they're from, and they all say they are experiencing oneness with the whole, oneness with God, oneness with existence. It's just words, folks. There's no reason to go to holy war over our words and our metaphors. The key is to get to your own peace. You know, get to your own peak experience, your own experience of oneness as a meditative practice, so that you're living in that space much of the time. And then out of that arises compassion. And if, in fact, it is the most pivotal time in history now, after 2,500 years of all of those teachings, if now we are really up against it in terms of climate change, weapons of mass destruction, poverty, hunger, racism, and particularly the absolutist, fundamentalist, extremist mind that knows that it has the only truth, that knows that its way is the only way, that knows that it can hate on behalf of its commitment to whatever it's calling the absolute. I'm just telling you, everybody else who is a decent human being, a person of goodwill, who honors people across races and creeds, needs to stand up in your life. We are needed to counteract the effects of extremism. We are needed to counteract the effects of global warming. We are needed to counteract the effects of hatred. We are needed In 1965, they did a poll in the United States about who was the most hated person. The most hated person by the largest number of people in the United States in 1965 was Dr. Martin Luther King. If you don't think transformation is possible, look around. Go visit the monument on the Washington Mall right next to Lincoln, Dr. Martin Luther King. And look what Dr. King did in his life to go from the most hated, most feared to being now affirmed as the greatest prophet of the 20th century and one of the most beloved figures in our culture across all races, ethnicities. Dr. King said this: our goal, the goal of people on the planet, is to create the beloved community. And this will require, now listen carefully, because this is the revolution of the Spirit. This is what he's talking about. And this will require an inner change in the quality of our soul and an outer change in the quantity of our compassionate action.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. We will see you next week, hopefully. Same time, same place, same bad channel. Have a great week.